is Tech Talk with Denovo. Virtual events that unlock the potential of legal case management software to save you time, reduce costs, and enhance your practice's overall performance. Let's make your life easier.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar this morning. Today, we're going to discuss the executory process in CaseLoad. So we're going to dive into the intricacies of your executory management, hopefully unlocking some true insight for you, discovering the benefits of integrating your inventory items into CaseLoad. Hopefully learn how this feature provides an accurate and comprehensive overview of the executory, enabling you to make informed decisions with confidence. We're going to look at harnessing our document automation features inside Executry as well, look at the capabilities of creating documents from Executry based on the information you've inputted already, and then we'll look at the reporting and the HMRC form generation at the end of the Executry or even throughout. So look at all those today. I'm going to give anyone that's not kind of familiar with the Denovo software, we'll look a little bit at the very start, tell you a little bit about what CaseLoad is, what it does, and then we'll focus on the executory part of it as we run through this. So the CaseLoad software it's a full practice management software. You have the accounts functions, the case management functions, time recording, and our executory module. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an executory I've just created just before I came on in terms of a matter. Look at what the matter looks like, and then we'll move into how we deal with that from an executory point of view. So I've opened up my most recent matter. You see I've created an executory for Mr. John Cook. It's executory of late John Cook. I've populated his address, and I've created some analysis around that. So things that will populate back through from the executory will be things like date of death, date of birth, the gross estate, and the IHT numbers. So those will be populated as we work on the executory moving forward. So there is a lot of buttons in here. I will say that in terms of the matter itself. We're going to mainly focus on the executory part of it today, but I thought it's useful to know that you're obviously going to create the matter and then create an executory of the back of the matter. So those two kind of come hand in hand. They're integrated into the one piece of software. So anything you do from the executory in terms of accounts and postings will all feed through, as will the events. So as an example of that, let's say we want to get some documentation into this file straight away, right at the start. I'm going to upload some documentation from here. So let's say we've got a driving license, a bank statement, and a passport image. It's dead easy in CaseLoad to get information into it. So any documents you've got, you can just populate them into the file. So I could take those three examples, click and drag them over to the executory, and then let's just call them AML ID, for example. And those three files have been imported into the events for that one. So if I go to my executory tab, you see this completely changes the window. So we've got our account details. I'll just push this one out here so we can see a bit more information. We've got all our ongoing executaries. We've got the date of death, whether there's a will held or not, the account date, the fee earner, and then all the way through to some of the numerical values about the executory that might be important, like the gross and net estate, qualifying estate, the debts will be totaled, the funeral expenses, in tax date, and then the other dates in their terms of interest, confirmation, and date of decree granted. So all of those give you a bit of perspective about the executory. So if you're looking through them, you can start to get a gauge as to where things are at. So if that one's a £500,000 estate, for example, we're at 4135, we're pretty close to getting towards the end of that one there. So I'm going to focus on much of the session on how we handle things within the executory. So let's go and look at Mr. Cook's executory that we've just created. So it's quite blank. There's not much in there already with no assets, no additional estate. debts of deceased, funeral expenses, administration, distribution. So I'm going to show you at the start of this how to get data in to the executory, and then we'll look at a more populated one towards the end. That's where it'll be a bit more interesting in terms of the form generation, documentation. So we'll look at how you get stuff in, and then we'll look at those end results in a more populated executory towards the end. So along the top, we've got a new button, Save and Close Doc Production, Reports and Forms. So reports we'll look at, and forms we'll look at. So you can see there's a few there that we can populate. There's no point in producing it just now because the executory is pretty blank at the moment. So along with the main executory, we've got a description, estate type. You can pick the date of death, the confirmation date, and executory account. So you would obviously fill those out. If there was a will held, then tick to say there is a will held. If there's not a will held, then you would untick that, and that allows you to enter a date of decree granted on this one. But for the purpose of this one, we'll just leave it as will held. But that's how you would do the difference between test date and intest date. So on the new button, you'll see we've got the ability to add assets, additional estates, sundry receipts, executors, anything you need to in terms of the executory would be on this menu here. So let's say we wanted to add an asset. Let's just populate some details. We'll give it a category. So let's say it's a heritable estate in Scotland. You can see there is the option to do all of those so that they're grouped on the appropriate HMRC forms. And let's just call this house. We'll put a value in, just so we've got some figures in there. And you can see when we're adding assets, we've got the ability to have various options in terms of how those are represented in the forums or in any of the reporting. So we've got a split deceased half share, itemised and represented by section and balance sheet. Excluded from the C1 is items value is estimated. So I'll maybe put that in just now because we don't know how much that estate is worth at the moment. And then this item is subject to interest or dividend. So if it's a bank account or a savings account of shares, you would tick that to say that it's subject to interest or dividend. I'll just show you what that then does is if you tick that, you'll see a new tab appears on the executory asset for income. So as you move forward with the executory, you can actually start to record any income that comes after the date of death. So income type might be interest-bearing account. As we said, shares or dividends or general interest gained during the administration. You would select that, give it a value, and then add that, and then that would add into the executory. When you click add income, you see it will start to add income to that item. But for the purposes of a house, I'll take that income off, and we'll just save and close that. I'll just populate some information. So we do now have an asset. So you can see we're starting to build up our asset lists, and any additional assets will be added to that as you move forward and as you gather information about the deceased, bringing in more assets to the executory. So in terms of expenses, you maybe have an expense of administration you want to add. So let's just call this funeral expenses. Give that an amount as well. There is some validation to make sure we are filling information out. So in terms of expenses administration, we've now got some funeral expenses. So when I go back to the executory, you can see these lovely wee tiles that are here. They're starting to populate the information. So we've got an asset we've just added. That's an unrealised asset at this stage because we've just added it. And we've got the value on there, 145,780, and then expenses of administration. So those will start to build up into the number of unpaid expenses of administration, especially at the start of the case. You're going to have to add assets, expenses of that, etc. So we've got an asset, we've got an expense. You can go on and obviously add the rest of those, any additional estates, debts of deceased, funeral expenses, all the ones you would want to add to that as well. You're obviously going to want to appoint an executor at that point. So on the executor, you would populate their details. You can see it'll just fill those details out. Obviously, the more information you can put in here, the better. As let's just say, just put some information in there. So basically filling this out, as I said, the more information, the better. You can pop in the address as well. That is important in terms of how the documentation then looks like the HMRC forms, give them an executor role, say he's a signee. So you're filling all that information out, and then you would put your declaration in there. I'm going to type all that out, but you would just pop in the declaration, and that would fill into the HMRC form. So the more you can put in here at the start, obviously the better in terms of what that's going to look like. So we save and close that. We've now got an executor. You can add more than one. So if there's more than one, you can add them, and they'll both appear in the HMRC forms. You would do the same for your beneficiaries, because obviously when it gets to distribution, you want to have all the beneficiaries in there. So for a new beneficiary, it's just a new button again. Everything's driven on this button here. So anytime you want to add anything to the executory, you would do so. You should find that on the new button. So let's add a beneficiary. Let's say John. And their address as well. So let's just save and close. So we'll save and close that executory now, and let's open up one that's a wee bit more populated so that we can look at some more information in there. So this one here, you can see we're a wee bit further down the line. So we've still got some unrealised assets, but we do have some realised. So we've got 3 unrealised. We've got some debts of deceased, excuse me. We've got the total. You can see what's been paid and what's not paid. So the expense administration will just go between that tile there as well. And you can see those informations in there. So if we look at the assets on this one, you can see we've got some transferred to beneficiaries. I'll show you how we do that. We've got some realised, and we've got some specific gift allocations as well. So that lets you see a better perspective in terms of this person's assets, this deceased assets, what they have, and what's happening with them already. The same with the expenses. So you can see some debts to deceased. Largely, most of them have been paid. Some are still currently due to be paid. But it's really easy to see that from this screen in terms of what those look like. Let's say we had to pay this one here. You can see in all of the debts and all of the assets, the ability to do posting requests from the executory. So we've got some account information in here. They've got a debt here, it's £500. You can create a requisition for that, and that'll create the appropriate type of debit slip that goes through to the postings. You see the date, the details, and the amount, and then I'm just going to choose a bank for that, and we'll save and exit on that. So Cashroom, or the cashier, will then get a notification to say that requisition has been posted through, and then you would then pay that item out and record it through the postings transactions of the executory. So very seamless. As soon as you've added, if you've added an asset and it's a bank account, and that bank account's been paid in, you can do a similar credit request for that from the asset. We're doing a requisition for a payment from the expense. So let's now mark that item has been paid. We'll save and close that, and you'll see that updates that to being paid. So it's now a paid expense, and that will keep us on track for the payments that need to be made from the account. Same with the assets. So if we look at the assets here, this one has been realised, but you can see you've also got the option to do a pay-in request from there. So all our information's in here about this, the DWP asset, the date of it, its movable estate, and the amount and information. So we could create a pay-in for that, and you'll see it's now a credit cash where they would go. All of the narratives filled in. So it's really good that if as much information as possible is put into the executory items, because they pull into these slip requests, and it makes it a lot easier for the cash room to process those transactions. They'll get the details in terms of the matter account information, but as I said, the more you can put into that, the better. So we say so on that, they'll get a notification again as well. So within any asset, while I'm here, you can see we've got the option for a specific gift allocation or a transfer to beneficiaries. If you do transfer to beneficiaries, that's when you activate the beneficiary allocation tab. So when you do that, you can see it's going to split them out. You can choose for it not to be a straight split. So you could do a 40-30-30 or a 50-25-25. You can change the percentages in there in terms of how that's to be distributed. At the moment, it's split evenly, but if that wasn't to be the case, then you can edit and change those. In here, you would just select each one. You'll see when you select one, it highlights them and lets you edit the percentage as required, and then you'll just save that allocation and save and close that. And you can see that's now went from realised to transferred to beneficiaries. So the status will always dynamically change on the assets because there's a lot more different types of status for an asset compared to an expense, as you know. So that will change as you move through the executory process. So that's how we would deal with assets and expenses. You can see in here we've got from within the executory, what we've done with CaseLoad is we've tried to keep all of it within the one window, the one environment. So if you're in the executory, we would hope that you're able to do everything you need to do as that being your role. So you can access the client details, you can access the matter details. So if you click on the matter button, it just takes you to the matter. You may want to check something, you might want to see something that's on the matter. So that lets you do that from within the executory screen itself. Within that window, we can click on events. So in events, you can see everything that's happened on the file. So basically what events are the history, the correspondence, the emails, the letters, the forms that have been created, any reports, they're all there and available in events. And when you're in events of an executory, you're in the events for the whole matter. So even if somebody that's in your department does not go into the executory itself, if they're importing emails for you, sending letters, creating documents, that will still show in the events. So the events for executory are no different from the matter events. It's the same view and lets you see the full perspective as to how what's happening with the particular matter. What you'll see in here is a little time recording icon. So that means that event has been time recorded. So anything that shows with an attachment icon means there's something attached. So we've maybe done a document earlier on, and I'll show you how to produce these from this file as well. But we've maybe done a document or a HMRC form, and you can see and preview those, because obviously as soon as you generate those are automatically saved to events as well. We can see the slips that we process through. So there's the debit slip that we put through for that expense item, I think it was. And then the one for the asset. So you can see those clearly as well. They're all well described in terms of everything you do on the file basically gets recorded into events, whether that's letters, forms, or beneficiaries. You can also import your emails from here as well. So we'll look at document production in a minute, but you can also import any email communication that you've received for regarding the Executry. So when I click on import from Outlook, you'll see this is my live mailbox, basically. So everything that's come in terms of an email is there for me to import. So I'll just pick a couple off here just so you can see what that looks like. So those two at the top, we've already got them in the events, but let's just pick them off in here anyway. You've ticked the highlighted emails you want to save in, and then click import, and that'll import those two emails straight into events. So you can see those are now shown with a mail icon. So anything that's an email item will show the mail icon to see that's an imported email, and you can see the details of those emails there. It's a real simple way of getting emails in and out. You can also drag and drop from Outlook. So for Outlook, you can drag and drop as well. So I could have dragged and dropped that email in rather than import from Outlook. Both work, both do the same. We'll look earlier on at drag and dropping documents in as well into the file. So all of it makes it easy to add correspondence to the file, whether that be a downloaded report or something else. Just as easy to get documentation out of the file. Just before we look at creating new documents, along here in the top, we've got the ability to look at the documents, and you can either email or export documents from the file from here if you want to upload or save anything take it out of the matter. So look at documents in terms of drag and dropping in. You can also do the same to take them out if you wanted to highlight certain documents that you wanted to export. I'll choose that document as well. You can then email the documents as they are, or email the documents and attach any Word documents as PDFs. So in that example, it would give me my 4 PDFs plus convert that letter to PDF as well. So an email with the 5 PDFs on it would be available for me to use. Or we can export the documents or copy those documents to clipboard. So if I copied them to clipboard, for example, and then went back into that folder here, you can see I can just paste them into this folder here, and that would put them into that folder, and then I could use that to upload the documents somewhere else. So it's real simple to get documents in and out of the Executry file as well. So if I go back to the main screen, so you'll be keen to know how to create those documents you were talking about earlier on. So on document production, you would select who you want to write to. So for this instance, I'll just select the 3 beneficiaries. You can obviously select everyone at the same time if you really wanted to, unlikely. Or you can pick certain ones to write to. So these 3 have all got some addresses. So what I'll do is I'll create the documents in a new event for each selected item. So you can either have it so that all the 3 letters get produced in the one Word doc if you like. So different pages, but the same document. Or we can have them selected and created individually. So let's do next on that. Then let's pick a letter to send. So let's just choose beneficiary one. You can time record those letters as well if you're sending them. So I'll just leave that ticked just so you can see what that looks like. You can also create follow-ups if you need to follow that up. And then let's just finish. So what that's done, as you can see, in a literal second, it's created those 3 individual documents. So one to David, one to Stephen, and one to James. So those 3 documents, real quick, super quick document production. And because I left time recording ticked, let's just create an entry for that. So let's just say a letter of charge. We'll save and close that. So when you look at the events for that, you can see it's created all the 3 individual events with those individual letters. The other day I did tick all of the items and it produced 55 documents in 25 seconds. So it's reasonably quick in terms of the document production. Not that you would hopefully need to do 55, but it does work if you need to. I've tested it. So we've got those 3 letters produced. You would do the same with the, I just go back to doc production. Obviously, if you're going to write to multiple assets and banks, you would do exactly the same as that. You would just tick those few bank assets, and you would just click on next. You can find templates in here as well. So if you're looking for ones, you can see I've just searched on bank. So let's just say we're doing an initial letter to bank, building society. I'll not click the time this one. Just double check if I picked the right one there. Create those again. Bank. That's it. Initial letter to bank, building society, and next, and finish. And then it'll just go and produce those documents for me. So this time I've got 5 letters in there. So, I mean, it's got to save time in terms of producing those documents for you rather than typing that all out manually. All those addresses populated. It's just so much quicker than any other process I can think of. And all that does is rely on you putting that information in at the start of the Executry. So what else can we do on Executry? Well, before we look at the reports and the forums, I'll just look into the postings part. So remember earlier on, we were looking at doing some posting requests through. These are all sitting as requisition slips that have still to be posted by the cash room, but it lets you see an overall perspective in terms of the amounts that are being posted through. So the income from assets, the expenses being paid out, and what that balance starts to look like. All those postings, when they're getting processed from cash room, then you'll start to see that populate through. And then if I just untick the exclude charges part as well, you can actually start to see your time recorded entries. I've just put a few on here just to show you those as an example, but it's really useful to start to see the time charges on the file as well. So you could see those as a standalone item and see how much work you've done on the Executry, how much is that going to be billable to me at that point in time as well. And obviously, if you've done more work and you can't see it in terms of the time charges, going back and looking at the events that you've done, what were the chargeable events, and make sure you update them to be time recorded items, just so that you're charging appropriately for the Executry. Obviously, we're trying to make it as slick as possible for you to produce the documentation. So the documentation in terms of a charge for a letter should hopefully be worth more value to you because you're spending less time on the admin side of the letter than doing it long-winded and typing out the names and addresses and all the information. So that's our postings. And you can see I'm never leaving the Executry. So whether I'm in the matter, the events, or the postings, I'm always in the same environment and seeing the same information. So if we go back to the Executry, I just want to check before we look at the reports and the forums, I want to check the deceased details just to make sure everything's accurate in there. Because as you go through the Executry, you might not know information, you might not know all of this information at the start. So what we've done with the deceased details is give you that ability to populate all the information, which is then going to feed into the HMRC forums. So we've got our deceased details and we've got our other details. So deceased details, we've got name, address, occupation, date of birth, date of death, place of death, NI, marital status, surviving relatives, how many children, how many grandchildren, and then the other details that we know, death certificate details, HMRC details if we know them, and then the will details, registration, codicil, and formal writings. So all of that's there and to be populated. And the more that's populated here, the better your end result's going to be in terms of the HMRC forums. So let's look at an example of some of those now, because you're probably wanting to see that. So in terms of the forms, on the menu, we'll have all of the available forms that you need in here. So C1, C4, C5, a whole bunch of IHT forums, 401 through to 420, and then 421 through to 436. So it's literally just a case of running those forms and it'll produce the documents for you as required. So if we look at the C1, you can see we've got the confirmation details, our matter reference, details of Mrs. Beaton, who's sadly passed away, the address details, occupation, date of birth, place of death, and date of death. And then each of our executors that we've added to that, and then our estate value for confirmation. So all of that's populated through. So a lot less manual input required here for the executory. So just zoom in a little bit on that one. You can see our declaration by our executor, deceased full name, the domiciled in, which was at the start, the declaration that we've put in for against the executor, pulls through all the way through into the information required, and then some details at the end about the deceased. It's all in there, the children, the grandchildren, the NI number. So a lot of that information is merging into this C1. And then if we look at some of the other forms, you see it's just the same. Most of it's names and addresses and date of death, etc., being pulled in, but the information then gets pulled into here for forum production, and then the same with all of the IHT forms. I'm not running them all, thankfully, but you can see those get filled in for you to populate the information into those forms as well. So as we said before, everything we're just creating automatically saves to events. So you can see all that information in terms of the ones those three we've just produced are all being saved to events. So not having to save that document down and populate it into events, it's been saved for you already. So earlier on I did the C1, C2 combined form, for example, and you can see that C1 information, and then the inventory will be filled in for that form as well, and grouped appropriately in terms of how that's been structured. So we're heritable estate in Scotland, assets and totaled, movable estate and totaled, all the way through to the total for confirmation, and those grouped at the end as well. So all of that was done just by populating the information on the executory in terms of the asset information that we had, and that would obviously carry on forward into the rest. And then a value of estate for confirmation, gross value, funeral expenses, other debts, and then a net value of estate towards the end. So all of the forms that can be generated from the executory are on that CaseLoad menu for you to pick from them. We've also got some reports on the menu as well. We're always adding additional reports to that. I've put some in here just as some examples for you guys to see what that looks like. So if you were after an asset listing, for example, you can see that's easily visible, viewable, printable, nice, clean format to look at. We've got the capital account as well. So the net estate at date of death, any gain on assets, additional estates, sundry receipts, all the way through to the distribution amount at the end. Some prior rights in there and pecuniary legacies as well. So all of that's displayed on the easy to read formatted capital account. And further on in the menu, we've got our some other reports. So what were the debts of deceased? They're all labelled out for you. And then estate at date of death obviously is quite important in terms of that information being populated as well. So you can see that there with the assets and the liabilities. Basically gives you that estate. Any reports you produce from CaseLoad can be emailed in various formats, as you can see on screen. You can also save those directly to events in those same formats, PDF, Excel, or Word. So anytime you produce a report, you could save it to events, and that would save it in to the events, as you can see in here with the capital account and the asset listing, estate at date of death reports. So all of those can be saved to events as well, so they're easy to view and deal with, because you never know what you need to do with them once they're being produced. So it gives you that option in terms of the reporting as well. So there's quite a few reports on the menu. There will be more added as we move forward with CaseLoad for Executry. So in terms of anything else, you can obviously add beneficiary interim payments. We've got some pecuniary legacies on there, and we've got one prior right we've added in there as well. So all of those can be added and put into the Executry. And as you've seen, as we've just looked, those are appearing in the reporting, any document production items you do, and any HMRC forms that require those bits of information as well. So in terms of CaseLoad for Executry, in a nutshell, that's probably it. I mean, I could go into a lot more detail in terms of what CaseLoad does in itself as well. If anyone's got any questions at the moment, they can pop them into the chat box if there's anything they want me to cover at this moment in time. But if not, then I think I've shown you quite a bit today in terms of the Executry process in CaseLoad. So just to give you a kind of brief overview while I'm finishing up, we've been the Executry part of the software has been under account software for a long time. So it's not something completely new to Denovo in terms of the Executry process. What we're looking to do with CaseLoad is bring that into a kind of next generation system. So someone's asked a question about integration with other systems. We've focused a lot on our conveyancing integrations this year, and we will be looking at some additional integrations with other providers probably next year. The one mentioned is iManage, so it's something we could look at. You could use the Executry kind of standalone as well, and we could have like links that send information through. So one, for example, we've done one with HubSpot. So HubSpot's a kind of marketing CRM tool where they feed in cases to CaseLoad, and then we tell HubSpot at the end when that's completed. So it could be a kind of a start and finish integration with that. as well. For anyone that doesn't have Executry yet, this is us just basically in launch mode at the moment. So anyone that has used or had access to Denovo Executry will be looking to move you into CaseLoad Executry in the near future. So if you don't have it yet, then we'll get in touch and we'll get that added to your CaseLoad features as well. So I'll just wait another couple of minutes in case anyone does have any more questions. For everyone else, thanks so much for joining in. I hope you found that useful. And sorry, I'll just answer this other question just given. Yeah, the Executry could be used as a standalone piece of software. What you would get, just to show you, you would basically just have to create, like we've done here, you would just have to create a matter and a matter account, but the Executry part of the system you could use as a standalone package. Someone just asking if it can be used without using the full Denovo practice management system. So the answer to that is yes. The CaseLoad Executry could be used as a standalone module to do everything that you've just seen me do today. It doesn't ultimately rely on it having to talk to the cash room functions or the and like run your whole practice management through it. It can be a standalone package, and you'll see that you'll get the benefits of the document production, the HMRC forms, and the reporting just by populating the assets and liabilities into CaseLoad for Executry. Okay, I'll wrap things up there then. This session has been recorded, so I'll make that recording available to everyone that signed up to join us this morning. As I said, and I'll say it again, I do appreciate your time. Thanks for joining in the session this morning. I hope you found that useful. It's nice to get some questions at the end, so that means most folk are still awake and I've not put you to sleep with Executry talk. So thanks for joining, and I look forward to chatting with you guys in the future. Take care.